The mare's scream cut through the canyon like a blade, but it wasn't the sound that stopped Alara Quinn cold. It was the brand burned into its flank. Blackthorn Ranch, the same ranch that owned half the valley and crushed anyone who crossed them. She should walk away. Let the animal die. She was a starving widow with nothing but an empty stomach and a dead husband's rifle. But as she stared at the trapped horse thrashing between the rocks, bleeding and wild-eyed, something broke open inside her chest. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was fate. Either way, she was about to make a choice that would change everything. Before we begin, if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and settle in. This one's a long ride. The town of Hollow Creek didn't welcome strangers, and it sure as hell didn't welcome widows with nothing to their name. Alara Quinn learned that the first day she walked down its single muddy street, burlap sack slung over her shoulder, boots falling apart at the seams. The stares came first, hard, measuring looks from men standing outside the saloon, cold appraisal from women sweeping their porches. Then came the silence, the kind that pressed against your eardrums and made you feel like you were drowning in open air. She kept walking, head up, eyes forward, like she had somewhere to be. She didn't. Her husband was 6 weeks dead, buried in a shallow grave 300 miles east after fever took him on the trail. They'd been heading west together, chasing the lie that land and opportunity waited for people willing to work for it. Instead, she'd gotten a corpse, an empty wagon sold for travel money, and the kind of loneliness that sat in your chest like a stone. Hollow Creek was supposed to be a stopping point, a place to rest, maybe find work, figure out what the hell came next. But the mercantile owner took one look at her and said they weren't hiring. The boarding house owner quoted her a price she couldn't afford and didn't offer charity. The preacher gave her a tight smile and suggested she might try the next town over. By sunset, Alara was sitting on the edge of the horse trough with half a dry biscuit she'd been saving for 2 days, watching the light die over the mountains. "You planning to sleep there?" She looked up. A man stood a few feet away, tall, weathered, with a sheriff's badge pinned crooked on his vest. His face wasn't unkind, but it wasn't friendly either. "No, sir," Alara said quietly. "Good. Town council doesn't like drifters settling in public spaces. Makes folks nervous." She almost laughed. Nervous. Like she was dangerous. Like she was anything other than bone-tired and half-starved. "I'll move along," she said. The sheriff nodded, already turning away. "See that you do." Alara waited until he was gone, then stood and walked east, away from the town, away from the judgment, away from every pair of eyes that had decided she was worth less than dirt. The wilderness didn't judge. It would kill you without malice, but at least it was honest about it. She found the line shack 2 days later, more by accident than design. She'd been following a deer trail deeper into the valley, looking for water, when the structure appeared through the trees like a ghost. It was old, logs rotting at the base, roof sagging in the middle, door hanging loose on leather hinges. But it had 4 walls and something resembling a roof, and that was more than she'd had in weeks. Inside, the air smelled like rodent nests and mildew. A broken chair lay in one corner. The fireplace was full of dead leaves. The single window was cracked, spiderwebs thick across the glass. Alara dropped her sack on the floor and sat down hard. For the first time since her husband died, she cried. Not the silent, dignified kind of crying. The ugly kind. The kind that tore out of your throat like an animal and left you gasping on the floor with snot running down your face. She cried until her ribs ached and her head pounded and there was nothing left inside her but empty space. Then she wiped her face on her sleeve, stood up, and got to work. The shack wasn't much, but it could be livable. She swept out the debris, patched the roof with pine branches and mud, stuffed rags into the gaps in the walls. She built a fire in the hearth and boiled water from the creek. She set snares for rabbits using wire salvaged from an old fence line. It wasn't a life, but it was survival, and survival was all she had left. The days blurred together, wake before dawn, check the traps, gather firewood, boil water, skin whatever she'd caught, eat, sleep, repeat. She stopped counting days after the first week. Time didn't mean much when every hour looked the same. The loneliness was the worst part, not the hunger or the cold or the constant ache in her muscles. The silence. The way her own thoughts echoed too loud inside her skull. She tried talking to herself just to hear a human voice, but it felt pathetic, so she stopped. Her husband used to fill the silence. He'd been a talker, always had some story or joke or plan spinning out of his mouth. She used to find it irritating. Now she would have given anything to hear his voice again, even if it was just complaining about the weather. But he was gone, and she was here, and that was just how things were. 3 weeks into her exile, she ran out of wire for the traps. Alara stood in the clearing outside the shack, staring at the broken snare in her hand. Without it, she couldn't catch rabbits. Without rabbits, she'd starve. Simple math. She could go back to Hollow Creek, try to buy wire, except she had no money, and no one there would give her credit. She could try stealing it, but getting caught meant jail or worse. Or she could go deeper into the valley. There had to be abandoned homesteads out here, old ranches, something left behind by people who'd given up and moved on. Maybe she'd find supplies. Maybe she'd find nothing. But sitting here wasn't an option. She packed light, just the rifle, a canteen, and a knife. The sun was already high when she set out, heading north along the creek. The valley opened up as she walked, the trees thinning into rocky meadows dotted with sagebrush. The mountains rose sharp on either side, their peaks still dusted with snow even though it was late spring. Beautiful country, if you had the luxury of appreciating beauty. Alara didn't. She walked for hours, eyes scanning for any sign of human presence. Old fence posts, rusted tools, anything useful. Instead, she found the canyon. It opened suddenly, a narrow slash in the earth hidden behind a rise of boulders. She almost walked past it, but something made her stop. A sound, maybe, or just instinct. Alara approached the edge carefully and looked down. The canyon wasn't deep, maybe 20 feet, but the walls were sheer and close together. A trickle of water ran along the bottom, pooling in the shadows. And there, wedged between the rocks near the far end, was the horse. It was a mare, big, dark brown with a black mane, and it was trapped. Alara could see it immediately, the way the animal's hind leg was caught between two boulders, the raw bloody scrapes along its side where it had thrashed trying to escape. The mare's head hung low, sides heaving. It had been there a while. She should leave. Walk away. The horse was as good as dead and she had her own problems. But she didn't move. The mare lifted its head slightly, and their eyes met. Just for a second. And in that second, Alara saw something she recognized. Not resignation, not surrender. Fury, the same kind she felt every morning when she woke up in that rotting shack and decided to keep breathing anyway. Damn it, Alara muttered. She slung the rifle over her shoulder and started looking for a way down. The descent was ugly. The rocks were loose and sharp, and twice she nearly lost her footing and went tumbling, but she made it to the bottom, boots splashing into the shallow water. The mare's ears flattened as Alara approached. Easy, she said softly. I'm not here to hurt you. The horse didn't believe her. It tried to rear, but the trapped leg held it in place, and the movement sent a fresh wave of pain through the animal. It screamed, high and shrill and full of terror. Alara froze, hands raised. Easy, easy now. She'd grown up around horses. Her father had kept a small farm back east, and she'd learned young how to gentle a spooked animal. You didn't rush, you didn't crowd, you let them see you weren't a threat. She crouched low, making herself smaller, and waited. Minutes passed. The mare's breathing slowed. Its eyes tracked her, wild but watching. That's it, Alara murmured. See? I'm not so scary. She moved closer. 1 step, 2. The mare tensed but didn't scream again. When she was close enough, Alara reached out slowly and touched the horse's neck. The skin was hot and slick with sweat. She could feel the animal trembling. You're stuck pretty good, aren't you? She said quietly. She moved around to examine the trapped leg. It was wedged tight between 2 rocks, the angle all wrong. The mare must have slipped down into the canyon and gotten caught trying to climb out. The leg wasn't broken, thank God, but the longer it stayed pinned, the worse the damage would be. Alara studied the rocks. They were big. Too big for her to move alone. But maybe she didn't need to move them. Maybe she just needed to shift them enough. She found a sturdy branch washed up against the canyon wall and wedged it under the smaller of the 2 boulders. Then she braced her weight against it and pushed. Nothing. She repositioned, pushed harder. Her boots slipped in the mud. Her arms burned. The rock shifted. just an inch. But an inch was enough. The mare felt the pressure ease and immediately tried to pull free. Too fast, too panicked. The leg caught again, and the horse thrashed, nearly kicking Alara in the head. "Stop!" she shouted. "Stop, damn it! You're making it worse!" The mare didn't stop. It threw its weight backward, screaming, eyes rolling white. Alara grabbed the halter, because of course the damn thing was still wearing a halter, and hauled herself up close to the horse's head. "Listen to me," she said, voice hard. "You keep fighting like that, you're going to snap your own leg. Then you're dead. You understand? Dead." The mare's ears swiveled toward her voice. "I'm going to help you," Alara continued, quieter now. "But you have to trust me, just for a minute. Can you do that?" The horse stared at her, breathing hard, twitching. "Yeah," Alara whispered. "I didn't think so either." She let go of the halter and went back to the branch. This time she braced her back against the canyon wall, feet planted against the rock, and shoved with everything she had. The boulder groaned, shifted, rolled just enough. The mare yanked its leg free and staggered backward, nearly trampling Alara in the process. For a moment, they both just stood there, panting. Then Alara noticed the brand. It was burned into the mare's right shoulder, a sharp, angular design that looked like a twisted thorn. Blackthorn Ranch. Alara's stomach dropped. Everyone in Hollow Creek knew about Blackthorn Ranch. It was the biggest outfit in the valley, owned by a man named Cade Blackthorn, who supposedly ran it like a fortress. He didn't tolerate trespassers, didn't tolerate thieves, and sure as hell didn't tolerate anyone messing with his property, which is exactly what she was doing right now. "Great," Alara muttered. "Just perfect." The mare limped a few steps, testing the leg. It was swollen and bloody, but it held weight. Good sign. Alara could leave now, climb out of the canyon, and pretend she never saw the horse. It would probably make its way back to the ranch eventually, or it would die out here. Either way, it wasn't her problem. Except it was. Because she'd already climbed down into this damn canyon and freed the animal, and now she couldn't stop thinking about what would happen if it didn't make it back. What if infection set in? What if predators found it before the ranch hands did? What if it died because she walked away? "This is stupid," she told herself. "This is the stupidest thing you've ever done." The mare watched her, ears flicking. Alara sighed. "Come on, let's get you out of here." Getting the horse out of the canyon was harder than getting herself down. The mare was weak and hurting, and the climb was steep. Alara had to coax and pull and shove the animal up the rocks, inch by inch, while her own muscles screamed in protest. By the time they reached the top, the sun was starting to sink toward the mountains. The mare stood on trembling legs, head low. Alara was covered in mud and blood, some hers, some the horse's. "All right," she said, breathing hard. "Now we just have to get you home." Except she had no idea where Blackthorn Ranch actually was. She knew it was north of Hollow Creek, somewhere in the upper valley. But that covered a lot of ground. She looked at the mare. "You know the way?" The horse stared at her blankly. "Right, stupid question." Alara grabbed the halter and started walking north, leading the limping mare behind her. They didn't make it far before dark fell. Alara had to stop and make camp in a small clearing, using the last of her matches to start a fire. The mare stood nearby, not running, not fighting, just exhausted. Alara tore strips from the bottom of her skirt and used them to wrap the horse's injured leg, doing her best to clean the wound first with water from the creek. It wasn't much, but it was something. "You're lucky I'm an idiot," she muttered as she worked. "Anyone with sense would have left you down there." The mare's ears flicked toward her voice. When the bandage was secure, Alara sat back against a tree and stared into the fire. This was insane. She was risking everything, her fragile survival, her safety, maybe her life, for an animal that belonged to a man who would probably shoot her on sight. But she couldn't turn back now, so she fed the fire, kept watch, and waited for morning. They started walking again at first light. The mare moved slower than the day before, but she moved. That was something. By midday, they crested a ridge, and Alara saw it. Blackthorn Ranch spread across the valley below like a small kingdom. Fenced pastures rolled out in every direction, dotted with horses and cattle. A sprawling house sat at the center, built from dark timber and stone. Barns, corrals, bunkhouses, all of it organized and maintained with the kind of precision that came from money and power. Alara's chest tightened. This was a mistake. She should turn around, let the horse go and hope it found its way back on its own. But before she could move, a rider appeared on the trail below. He was alone, tall in the saddle, dark hat pulled low, and he was looking right at her. Alara's hand moved instinctively to the rifle slung across her back, but she didn't draw it. That would only make things worse. The rider approached slowly, his horse picking its way up the rocky trail. As he got closer, Alara could see his face, hard angles, dark stubble, eyes the color of winter sky. He looked like someone who'd spent his whole life outdoors and hadn't smiled in years. He reined in a few feet away and stared at her, then at the mare. "That's my horse," he said. His voice was low, flat, dangerous. "I know," Alara said. His eyes narrowed. "You steal her?" "No." "Then how'd you get her?" Alara met his gaze and didn't flinch. "Found her trapped in a canyon. Freed her. Brought her back." Silence. The man's hand rested on the pistol at his hip, not threatening exactly, but present. "That's so," he said finally. "That's so." He dismounted, movements controlled and deliberate, and walked over to the mare. Alara stepped back, giving him space. He ran a hand over the horse's neck, checking the wounds, the bandaged leg. His jaw tightened. "She's been missing 3 days," he said quietly. "Thought she was dead." "Almost was." He looked up at her. "Why'd you help her?" Alara hesitated. "Because I'm an idiot. Because I couldn't walk away. Because she looked at me like she wanted to live, and I remembered what that felt like." "Seemed like the right thing to do," she said instead. The man studied her for a long moment. Then he straightened and held out his hand. "Cade Blackthorn." Alara stared at the offered hand. Then she took it. "Alara Quinn." His grip was firm, rough. He let go and stepped back. "You got a place to stay, Mrs. Quinn?" "Miss," she corrected. "And no." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You're the one living in the old line shack." It wasn't a question. Alara's stomach sank. "You know about that?" "I know everything that happens on my land. That shack's been abandoned for 5 years. Didn't figure anyone would be desperate enough to squat there." Heat flooded her face. "I didn't know it was yours. I'll leave." "Didn't say you had to." She blinked. Cade turned back to his horse, gathering the reins. "You know anything about healing animals?" "Some. My father kept horses." "Any good at it? Good enough to get your mare out of a canyon and patch her up?" He almost smiled. Almost. "Fair point." He swung back into the saddle and looked down at her. "Come down to the ranch tomorrow morning, early. If you're serious about needing work, I'll give you a trial. 1 week. You prove you're worth keeping, I'll pay you fair and give you a place to stay. You prove you're not, you're gone." Alara's heart kicked against her ribs. "Why?" "Because I need someone who knows horses, and you just saved my best breeding mare. Seems like fate or stupidity. Either way, I'm willing to find out which." He clicked his tongue, and his horse started moving. The injured mare followed without being led, limping but steady. Cade paused at the edge of the ridge and glanced back. "Don't be late," he said. Then he was gone, disappearing down the trail toward the ranch below. Alara stood alone on the ridge, heart pounding, mind racing. This was insane. Walking into Blackthorn Ranch was probably the dumbest thing she could do. She didn't know this man, didn't know what he wanted, didn't know if she could trust him. But she also didn't have any other options. So she turned and started walking back toward the line shack, already planning what she'd say when she showed up at his door in the morning. Maybe fate. Maybe stupidity. Either way, her life was about to change. Alara didn't sleep that night. She lay on the hard floor of the line shack, staring at the ceiling beams while her mind spun in circles. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Cade Blackthorn's face, the hard set of his jaw, the way his eyes had measured her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. She kept hearing his voice. "Don't be late." By the time gray light started seeping through the cracked window, she was already up, splashing cold creek water on her face and trying to make herself presentable. It didn't work. Her dress was stained and torn at the hem. Her hair was a mess. She looked exactly like what she was, a desperate woman with nothing to lose. She arrived at the ranch gates as the sun broke over the mountains. The main house looked bigger up close. 2 stories of dark timber and riverstone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Smoke rose from the chimney. Somewhere behind the house, she could hear men's voices and the sound of horses moving in the corrals. Elara walked up the dirt path toward the porch, boots crunching on gravel. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. The front door opened before she reached it. Cade stepped out, already dressed for work in worn canvas pants and a faded shirt. He looked like he'd been up for hours. "You came," he said. "You told me to." People don't always do what they're told. He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the barn. "Come on. Work starts now." Elara followed him across the yard. The ranch was already alive with activity. Men moved between buildings, carrying tools and feed. Horses stamped in their stalls. A rooster crowed somewhere behind the chicken coop. Everything was organized, clean, maintained, the opposite of the chaos Elara had been living in. Cade led her into the main barn, a massive structure that smelled like hay and leather and horse sweat. Stalls lined both sides, most of them occupied. At the far end, the injured mare stood with her head hanging over the gate, ears pricked forward. "She's doing better," Cade said, stopping at the stall. "Legs still swollen, but she's putting weight on it." Elara approached slowly, letting the mare smell her hand. The horse nickered softly, recognizing her. "What's her name?" Elara asked. "Doesn't have one. I don't name them unless they prove themselves worth keeping long term." Elara glanced at him. "That seems cold." "It's practical. Lose enough things you care about, you learn not to get attached so easy." There was something in his voice when he said it, something that made Elara think he wasn't just talking about horses. She turned back to the mare and ran her hand along the animal's neck. "Well, she proved herself. She survived." "So did you," Cade said quietly. Their eyes met, held for a beat longer than necessary. Then Cade cleared his throat and stepped back. "All right, let's see what you can actually do." He spent the next hour testing her, not with words, but with tasks. He handed her a bridle and watched how she handled it, asked her to check a gelding's hooves for stones, had her mix a poultice for a colt with a swollen hock. Elara worked methodically, doing everything the way her father had taught her years ago. She didn't rush, didn't try to show off, just did the work. Cade watched without comment, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When she finished treating the colt, she straightened and wiped her hands on her skirt. "What else?" "That's enough for now." He walked over to examine the colt's leg himself, checking her work. His fingers prodded the swelling carefully. "This is good, clean. You know what you're doing." "I told you I did." "People tell me a lot of things. Most of them are lies." "I don't lie." He looked up at her, something sharp in his gaze. "Everyone lies, Miss Quinn. Question is whether they lie about things that matter." Before Elara could respond, the barn door swung open and 2 men walked in. The first was older, maybe 50, with a thick gray beard and shoulders like a bull. The second was younger, lean and wiry, with pale eyes that reminded Elara of a snake. Both of them stopped when they saw her. "Boss," the older man said slowly. "Who's this?" "New hire," Cade said. "Trial basis. She'll be working with the horses." The younger man's lip curled. "You hiring strays now?" "Watch your mouth, Lyle," Cade said, his voice dropping 10 degrees. Lyle held up his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes stayed fixed on Elara. She forced herself not to look away. The older man stepped forward, offering his hand. "Name's Dutch. I'm the foreman here. Don't mind Lyle. He's got the manners of a feral dog." Elara shook his hand. "Elara Quinn." Dutch's grip was firm, but not aggressive. "You really know horses, or are you just desperate for work?" "Both," Elara said honestly. Dutch barked a laugh. "At least she's honest." "All right, Quinn, you stick close to me today? I'll show you the ropes." Cade nodded. "Good. I've got business in town. Dutch, you're in charge. Keep her busy." He left without another word, his boots echoing on the barn floor. Lyle waited until Cade was gone, then turned to Elara with a sneer. "You think you're going to last here? Women don't belong on a working ranch." "Then I guess I'm not like other women," Elara said flatly. "We'll see about that." He walked out, leaving Elara alone with Dutch. The foreman sighed and shook his head. "Don't let Lyle get under your skin. He's all bark." "And if he's not?" Dutch gave her a long look. "Then you deal with it. This ain't a soft place, Quinn. You want to survive here, you got to be tougher than the men who want you gone. I've survived worse, Elara said. I believe you. Dutch kept her working until her hands blistered. He had her mucking stalls, hauling feed, grooming horses that didn't want to be groomed. Hard, dirty work that left her sweating and sore. But she didn't complain, didn't slow down, didn't ask for breaks. By midday, some of the other ranch hands had started watching her with something other than suspicion, not respect exactly, but interest. Around noon, Dutch brought her to the cook shack for lunch. It was a low building near the bunkhouse, filled with rough wooden tables and the smell of fried meat. A dozen men sat eating and talking in low voices. The conversation died the moment Elara walked in. She kept her head up and followed Dutch to the serving line. The cook, a heavy-set man with burn scars on his forearms, ladled stew into a bowl and handed it to her without comment. Elara sat at the end of one table, as far from the others as possible. Dutch sat across from her. They'll get used to you, he said quietly. Will they? Maybe. Maybe not. Depends on whether you're still here next week. Elara ate in silence, ignoring the stares. The stew was good, better than anything she'd eaten in months. She had to force herself not to eat too fast. Halfway through the meal, a woman entered the cook shack. She was younger than Elara, maybe 25, with dark hair pinned back in a severe bun and a dress that looked expensive even with an apron over it. She moved through the room like she owned it, her eyes scanning the tables until they landed on Elara. Her expression went cold. Dutch, the woman said sharply. Who's that? Dutch stood, wiping his mouth. Afternoon, Mrs. Brennan. This is Elara Quinn. She's working with the horses. Since when? Since this morning. Boss hired her. Mrs. Brennan's jaw tightened. I see. And where exactly is she staying? Don't know yet. That's between her and the boss. The woman's eyes stayed fixed on Elara. Well, I suppose we'll see how long this lasts. She turned and walked out, spine rigid. Elara looked at Dutch. Who's that? Catherine Brennan, Dutch's wife. He grimaced. She runs the household, thinks that gives her authority over everything else, too. She doesn't like me. She doesn't like anyone she didn't personally approve. Don't take it personal. But Elara could already feel the weight of Catherine's hostility settling over her like a shadow. The afternoon was worse than the morning. Dutch had her breaking a young gelding, teaching it to accept a saddle and bridle. The horse was green and skittish, and it took every ounce of patience Elara had to keep from losing her temper. But she did it. Slowly, carefully, she worked the animal until it stood calm under the saddle. When she finally stepped back, sweating and exhausted, she found Cade leaning against the corral fence, watching. How long have you been there? She asked. Long enough. He pushed off the fence and walked over, running an appraising eye over the gelding. Not bad. Most people would have forced it and made the horse meaner. Force doesn't work, not with horses. No, Kate agreed. It doesn't. He turned to face her fully. You did good work today. Dutch says you didn't quit, didn't complain. That means something. Does that mean I passed the test? It means you survived day 1. 6 more to go. Elara felt a flicker of frustration. What exactly are you looking for? Someone who won't run the first time things get hard. Someone I can trust not to steal from me or sell my business to competitors in town. Someone who understands that this ranch only works if everyone pulls their weight. He paused. You might be that person, or you might not. Time will tell. And if I'm not, then you leave and we both forget this happened. Elara met his gaze. I'm not going to leave. We'll see. He started to walk away, then stopped. There's a small room above the tack house. It's not much, but it's got a bed and a stove. You can stay there during the trial, better than that shack you've been living in. Elara blinked. You're giving me a room? I'm giving you a place to sleep so you're not dead on your feet every morning. Don't read into it. Thank you. Cade nodded once, then disappeared toward the main house. The room above the tack house was small, barely bigger than a closet, but it had a real bed with a real mattress and a small iron stove in the corner. A single window looked out over the corrals. Elara stood in the doorway, staring at the bed like it might vanish if she looked away. She hadn't slept in a real bed since her husband died. That night, she lay on the mattress and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. 1 day ago, she'd been alone in a rotting shack with no future. Now she had work, a roof, a chance. It didn't feel real. Sleep came hard, and when it did, it was full of dreams she didn't understand. The next 3 days followed the same brutal pattern. Work from dawn until dark. Hands blistered and raw, muscles screaming. But Alara pushed through it, refusing to show weakness. Dutch warmed to her gradually. He started explaining things instead of just ordering her around. Showed her the ranch's breeding records, the schedules, the way Cade liked things organized. The other ranch hands stayed distant, but they stopped glaring. That was progress. Lyle, though, got worse. He found small ways to make her life difficult, hiding tools she needed, letting horses loose from stalls she'd just cleaned, spreading rumors in the bunkhouse that she was sleeping with Cade to keep her job. Alara ignored it. Confronting him would only make things worse, but on the 4th day, he pushed too far. She was in the feed room measuring out grain when Lyle appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, blocking her exit. "You know what I think?" he said casually. Alara didn't look up. "I don't care what you think. I think you're trouble. I think you're going to cause problems here, and when you do, the boss is going to blame the rest of us." "Then stay out of my way." Lyle stepped closer. "Or maybe I should make sure you leave before that happens." Alara straightened, meeting his eyes. "Is that a threat?" "It's advice. You don't belong here. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." "No." His face darkened. "You think you're tough? You think just because the boss gave you a pity job that makes you one of us?" "I think," Alara said quietly, "that you're scared of me. And I think that makes you stupid." Lyle's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "You little—" She moved without thinking, grabbed the grain scoop, and slammed it into the side of his head. Lyle staggered back, cursing, hand pressed to his temple. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Touch me again," Alara said, voice shaking with adrenaline. "And I'll do worse." Lyle's eyes burned with rage. "You're going to regret that." He turned and stormed out. Alara stood alone in the feed room, heart pounding, hands trembling. She'd just made an enemy, a dangerous one. But she didn't regret it. 20 minutes later, Dutch found her in the barn. "Lyle says you attacked him." "He grabbed me first." Dutch sighed and rubbed his face. "Damn it, Quinn. You couldn't just ignore him?" "He put his hands on me. What was I supposed to do? Not crack his skull open with a grain scoop. It was just a scoop. If I wanted to crack his skull, I'd have used something heavier." Despite himself, Dutch almost smiled. "You got fire. I'll give you that." "Is Cade going to fire me?" "Depends. Lyle's already spinning the story to make you look like the aggressor. Says you came at him unprovoked." "That's a lie." "I know, but Catherine's going to take his side. She's been looking for an excuse to get rid of you since day one." Alara's chest tightened. "So what do I do?" "Tell the truth, and hope the boss believes you." She found Cade in his office, a small room attached to the main house, cluttered with ledgers and maps. He was bent over a stack of papers, a pen in one hand. He looked up when she knocked. "Come in." Alara stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Lyle told you what happened?" "He did." "And?" Cade leaned back in his chair, studying her. "He says you attacked him for no reason. Says you're unstable and dangerous." "That's not what happened." "Then tell me your version." Alara took a breath and laid it out. No embellishment, no excuses, just the facts. When she finished, Cade was silent for a long moment. "You hit him with a grain scoop," he said finally. "Yes." "Hard enough to draw blood." "Yes." "Good." Alara blinked. "Good?" "Lyle's been pushing boundaries since the day I hired him. Thought maybe he'd learned his lesson after I warned him last month." "Guess not." Cade stood and crossed to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "I don't tolerate men who put their hands on women. I don't care what the reason is. He touched you. He got what he deserved." Relief flooded through Alara so fast she almost staggered. "So I'm not fired?" "No. But you're not out of the woods yet." "What do you mean?" Cade turned to face her. "Catherine's been in my ear all afternoon. Says you're a distraction. Says the men don't trust you. Says you're going to cause more problems than you're worth." "Do you believe her?" "I believe she wants you gone. Whether she's right is another question." "I've worked hard," Alara said quietly. "I've done everything you asked. I haven't caused problems. Lyle did. I know. Then why does it matter what Catherine thinks? Cade's jaw tightened. Because she's married to my foreman, and if she's unhappy, Dutch is unhappy. And if Dutch is unhappy, the whole ranch suffers. That's not fair. No, Cade agreed. It's not. But it's reality. Alara felt anger rising in her chest. So, what are you saying? You want me to leave? I'm saying you need to prove Catherine wrong. Work harder. Keep your head down. Don't give her ammunition. I defended myself. I know. And I'm glad you did. But it doesn't change the fact that people are watching you now, waiting for you to fail. You want to stay here, you're going to have to be better than everyone else. Twice as good for half the credit. That's not fair either. Life isn't fair, Miss Quinn. You of all people should know that. The words stung because they were true. Alara stood there, hands clenched at her sides, fighting the urge to scream. She'd survived her husband's death, survived starvation, survived weeks alone in the wilderness. And now she had to survive this too, the politics, the gossip, the constant judgment. I'm not leaving, she said finally. Cade's expression softened, just slightly. Good, because I don't want you to. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Something unspoken, but heavy. Then Cade cleared his throat and turned back to his desk. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hard. Alara left the office feeling like she'd just survived a storm. The next 2 days were exactly as hard as Cade promised. Catherine made sure of it. Tasks that should have taken an hour suddenly took 3 because tools went missing or supplies weren't where they were supposed to be. Alara found her saddle damaged, the leather cut deliberately. Someone spread manure across the floor of her room while she was working. She cleaned it up without complaint and kept going. But the worst part wasn't the sabotage. It was the isolation. The other ranch hands stopped talking to her entirely. Even Dutch kept his distance, clearly caught between loyalty to his boss and loyalty to his wife. Alara ate meals alone, worked alone, spent her evenings alone in the small room above the tack house, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting up from the bunkhouse. She'd been lonely before, but this was different. This was being surrounded by people and still completely alone. On the 6th day, she almost broke. She was in the barn at dusk, finishing up the evening feed, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting Lyle or Catherine or someone else looking to make her life harder. Instead, it was Cade. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking tired. You're still here, he said. Where else would I be? Gone. Most people would have left by now. I'm not most people. Cade walked into the barn, stopping a few feet away. No, you're not. Silence stretched between them. Catherine told me you've been causing trouble, he said finally. Alara's stomach dropped. That's not true. I know, Dutch told me what's really been happening. The sabotage, the isolation. His jaw tightened. I'm sorry, I should have put a stop to it sooner. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to see if you'd quit, if you'd prove Catherine right. Anger flared hot in Alara's chest. So this was another test? Everything's a test, Miss Quinn. That's how you learn who people really are. And who am I? Cade looked at her for a long moment. Someone who doesn't quit. Someone who fights even when the fight's rigged against them. Someone... He trailed off, then shook his head. Someone I'd like to keep around. Alara's breath caught. Your trial's over, Cade continued. You've got the job. Permanent. I'll tell the crew tomorrow. Relief and something else, something warm and unexpected, flooded through her. Thank you, she said quietly. Cade nodded. Don't thank me yet. Catherine's not going to stop just because I made it official. You're still going to have to fight for every inch of ground. I know. And people are going to talk. About you. About us. Let them talk. Cade's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You really don't care what people think, do you? I stopped caring the day my husband died and the world kept spinning without him. Caring doesn't keep you alive. Work does. That's a hard way to live. It's the only way I know. Cade was quiet for a moment. Then he said, My wife died 3 years ago. Her and our son. Fever took them both in the same week. Alara's throat tightened. She hadn't expected that. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything. His voice was flat, but there was pain underneath it. Old pain that hadn't healed. I thought if I just kept working, kept the ranch going, it would get easier. It hasn't. No, Alara said softly. It doesn't get easier. You just get better at carrying it. Cade looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, his expression wasn't guarded. Yeah, he said. I guess you would know. They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd lost everything and somehow kept going anyway. I should let you finish, Cade said finally. It's late. He started to leave, then paused at the door. Alara? It was the first time he'd used her first name. Yeah? I'm glad you stayed. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the barn with a feeling she couldn't quite name. That night, Alara lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had a job now, security, a future maybe. But she also had something more dangerous. She had hope. And hope, she'd learned, was the most painful thing to lose. The weeks that followed settled into something almost resembling normal. Alara worked from sunup to sundown, her hands growing calloused and strong, her body adapting to the relentless physical demands of ranch life. The mare she'd rescued, still unnamed despite Alara's quiet insistence, recovered fully and became one of the best working horses on the property. Cade noticed. He didn't say much about it, but Alara caught him watching her work with an expression she couldn't quite read. Dutch warmed to her completely once Cade made her position official. He started teaching her the business side of things, how to read breeding charts, manage feed costs, spot a lame horse before it went fully unsound. Catherine still glared daggers whenever they crossed paths, but she'd stopped actively sabotaging, probably because Cade had made it clear that interfering with ranch operations would have consequences. Lyle kept his distance. His head had healed, but his pride hadn't. Alara could feel his resentment simmering every time they were in the same space, but he was smart enough not to push it. Not yet. The other hands gradually accepted her presence the way you accept weather. She was just there, part of the landscape. A few even started nodding to her at meals. Progress, Alara supposed, even if it was grudging. But the real change happened slowly between her and Cade. It started with small things. Him asking her opinion on a sick colt, her pointing out a weakness in the fence line before it became a problem. Conversations that lasted longer than strictly necessary. The way his expression softened when she walked into a room, like he'd forgotten to keep his guard up. She told herself it didn't mean anything. He was her employer. She was his employee. That's all it was. Except it wasn't, and they both knew it. One evening in late summer, after the work was done and the sun was bleeding red across the mountains, Alara found Cade leaning against the corral fence, watching the horses. She walked over without thinking about it. Long day? They're all long. He glanced at her. You settling in all right? As all right as I can be when half the people here still think I'm going to steal the silverware. Cade's mouth twitched. We don't have silverware, just tin forks. Then I guess they're worried I'll steal those. He almost laughed. Almost. You've done good work. The ranch is running smoother than it has in months. Dutch says the books are balancing better too. That's because I actually write things down instead of keeping it all in my head and hoping for the best. Dutch does his best. I know, but his best involves a lot of guessing. This time Cade did laugh, a short, rusty sound like he'd forgotten how. You're not wrong. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the horses move across the pasture. The air smelled like dust and grass and the particular scent of evening in the high country. Why'd you really give me this job? Alara asked quietly. Cade was quiet for a long time. You want the truth? Always. Because you reminded me of someone. Your wife? No. He turned to look at her. Me. Before everything went to hell. You had that look in your eyes, like the world had beaten you down, but you were too stubborn to stay down. I respected that. Alara's chest tightened. And now? Now I think maybe I hired you for selfish reasons too. Like what? Like wanting someone around who understands what it's like to lose everything and keep going anyway. Someone who doesn't try to fix things with empty words. He paused. You don't do that. You just exist next to the grief without trying to make it smaller than it is. That's because I know it doesn't get smaller. You just build a life around it. Yeah, Cade said softly. You do. Their shoulders were almost touching. Alara could feel the warmth of him through the fabric of her shirt. People are going to talk, she said. If we keep this up, whatever this is. Let them. Catherine already hates me. This will make it worse. Catherine hates everyone who isn't Catherine. Don't take it personal. Alara smiled despite herself. That's what Dutch said. Dutch is smarter than he looks. They fell silent again. The sun sank lower, painting everything gold and red. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. I should go, Alara said, even though she didn't want to. Yeah, you should. Neither of them moved. Finally, Cade pushed off the fence. Get some rest. Tomorrow we're moving the herd to the upper pasture. Gonna need everyone. I'll be ready. He nodded and walked toward the house, hands shoved in his pockets. Alara stood alone by the corral, her heart doing something complicated and inconvenient in her chest. This was dangerous, getting close to him, letting herself feel things she'd promised herself she wouldn't feel again. But standing here in the fading light, watching the man disappear into the shadows of his big empty house, she realized it was already too late. She was already in too deep. The next morning, the work started before dawn. Moving cattle was brutal, hot, dusty, exhausting labor that required every hand on deck. Alara rode alongside Dutch and 3 other ranch hands, pushing the herd slowly up the mountain trail toward the summer grazing land. Cade rode point, guiding the lead animals. He sat easy in the saddle, like he'd been born there. Probably had been, Alara thought. By midday, they'd gotten the cattle settled in the upper pasture and were heading back down. Alara's thighs ached from hours in the saddle, and her throat was raw from breathing dust, but she felt good. Useful. Like she was actually part of something instead of just surviving on the edges. They were halfway down the mountain when Dutch pulled up alongside her. You're a decent rider, he said. My father taught me young. It shows. He was quiet for a moment. Look, I wanted to say something about Catherine. Alara tensed. You don't have to. Yeah, I do. She's been hard on you, harder than she should be, and I haven't stopped it like I should have. You're in a difficult position. That's no excuse. You've earned your place here. She needs to accept that. Will she? Dutch sighed. Catherine doesn't like change, and she especially doesn't like women who don't fit into the boxes she thinks they should fit into. You're independent, strong. You don't need anyone's permission to exist. That scares her. Why? Because she's the opposite. Everything she has, everything she is, comes from being my wife. If women like you can make it on their own, what does that say about her choices? Alara had never thought about it that way. I'm not trying to make her feel bad. I know, but it doesn't matter. Just watch your back around her. She's got a mean streak when she feels threatened. I've noticed. Dutch nodded and rode ahead to catch up with the others. Alara chewed on his words the rest of the ride down. That evening, she was in the barn brushing down her horse when she heard voices outside. She recognized them immediately, Lyle and another ranch hand named Simmons. I'm telling you, Lyle was saying, something's going on between her and the boss. You're full of shit, Simmons replied. Blackthorn doesn't mess around with employees. Then explain why he gave her the job, why he keeps her around when everyone knows she's trouble. Maybe because she's good at what she does? Or maybe she's good at other things. Lyle's voice was ugly. You see the way he looks at her? Man hasn't touched a woman since his wife died. He's weak for her. Alara's hand stilled on the brush. Even if that's true, it's none of our business, Simmons said. It is when it affects how this place runs. He's distracted, making bad decisions, all because he's thinking with the wrong part of his anatomy. You need to shut your mouth before someone hears you. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Alara stepped out of the stall, making her presence known. Both men froze. Evening, boys, she said coldly. Lyle's face twisted into a sneer. Speak of the devil. If you got something to say about me, say it to my face. All right, you're using the boss to secure your position here, batting your eyes, playing the tragic widow. It's pathetic. And you're a coward who talks big when he thinks no one's listening. Which is worse? Lyle took a step toward her, fists clenched. You think you're untouchable because Blackthorn's sweet on you? That protection won't last forever. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Simmons grabbed Lyle's arm. Come on, man, let's go. Lyle shook him off, but stepped back. Watch yourself, Quinn. You're making enemies faster than you can count them. He stalked off into the darkness. Simmons gave Alara an apologetic look and followed. Alara stood alone in the barn, her heart pounding with anger and something darker. Fear, maybe. Or the recognition that Lyle was right about one thing. She was making enemies. And enemies were dangerous. 2 weeks later, everything changed. Alara was in town picking up supplies, a task Cade had started trusting her with despite Catherine's protests. She'd just loaded the last sack of grain into the wagon when she noticed the man standing across the street. He was tall and rangy, with a face like a hatchet and cold eyes that tracked her movements. He wore his guns low on his hips, the leather oiled and well-maintained, the kind of man who used them often. Alara felt her instincts prickle. She climbed onto the wagon seat and took up the reins, but she could feel his eyes on her back as she drove away. She didn't think much of it until she got back to the ranch and found Cade in the barn, his face tight with tension. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. "What kind of problem?" "Boone Mercer's back in the valley." The name meant nothing to Alara. "Who?" "An outlaw. Used to run cattle rustling operations through here until I testified against him 5 years ago. He lost his land, spent 3 years in prison. Swore he'd make me pay when he got out." Alara's stomach dropped. "And he's out now." "Released last month. Been lying low, but word is he's gathering men, building a gang." "You think he'll come after you?" "I know he will. Question is when." Dutch appeared in the doorway. "Boss, we got a situation. One of the hands just rode in from town. Says Mercer's been spreading rumors. Claims we've been stealing horses from smaller ranches and rebranding them." Cade's jaw tightened. "That's a lie." "Course it is, but people are listening. Fear makes folks stupid." "What kind of rumors?" Alara asked. Dutch looked uncomfortable. "Says you're part of it, that you're Mercer's inside contact, that you helped steal horses and brought that mare here as cover." The words hit Alara like a physical blow. "That's insane. I found that mare trapped in a canyon." "We know that," Cade said. "But Mercer's smart. He's targeting you because you're the newest, the most vulnerable. If he can turn the town against you, he can turn them against the whole ranch." "So what do? We prove him wrong. We open our books, show our breeding records, let people see we've got nothing to hide." "And if they don't believe us?" Cade's expression went hard. "Then we prepare for a fight." Over the next few days, the situation deteriorated fast. More rumors spread through Hollow Creek like wildfire. Someone claimed they'd seen Alara meeting with strange men in the woods. Another said she'd been overheard talking about stealing cattle. All lies, but lies that stuck. The sheriff came out to the ranch asking questions. Cade showed him the records, explained everything. The sheriff left looking unconvinced. "He thinks there's smoke, there's fire," Dutch said grimly after the lawman rode away. "Won't take much more for him to come back with an arrest warrant." Alara felt panic rising in her chest. "For me?" "For whoever Mercer decides to pin this on. Right now, that's you." Cade was pacing the office like a caged animal. "Mercer's not trying to get us arrested. He's trying to isolate us, turn the town against us so when he makes his move, no one will help." "What move?" Alara asked. "Whatever he's planning. Rustling our herd, burning us out, I don't know, but it's coming." That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in the small room above the tack house, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. This was her fault. If she hadn't come here, Mercer wouldn't have a target to use against Cade. The ranch would be fine. By dawn, she'd made her decision. She packed her few belongings into the burlap sack she'd arrived with and slipped out of the room before anyone else was awake. She'd leave quietly, disappear back into the wilderness, remove the target from Cade's back. She made it as far as the barn before he found her. "Going somewhere?" Cade's voice cut through the pre-dawn darkness. Alara turned. He stood in the barn doorway, fully dressed, arms crossed. "I'm leaving," she said, "before I cause more damage." "This isn't your fault, isn't it? Mercer's using me to get to you. If I'm gone, he loses that leverage. And if you're gone, he wins. You think I'm going to let some outlaw dictate who works on my ranch?" "This isn't about pride, Cade. This is about survival, yours and the ranch's." He walked toward her, his face set. "You think I've survived this long by running away from fights? I think you've survived by being smart. And the smart thing is to let me go." "No." The word was flat. final. The smart thing is to stand together and call his bluff. What if it's not a bluff? Then we fight, but we do it together. Alara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She was so tired of fighting, so tired of being the reason people suffered. I don't want you to get hurt because of me, she said quietly. Too late. I'm already... He stopped, jaw working. You matter, Alara. To this ranch. To me. I'm not letting you walk away. Cade, no. Listen to me. I've lost too many people I care about. I'm not losing you too. Not without a fight. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. You care about me, Alara said softly. Of course I do. I thought that was obvious. Nothing about you is obvious. He almost smiled. Fair. Alara looked down at the sack in her hands. Everything she owned in the world, and it barely filled half the bag. What if we can't win, she asked. Then we lose fighting, but at least we lose together. She met his eyes, saw the determination there, the stubborn refusal to surrender. It reminded her of herself. All right, she said finally, I'll stay. Relief crossed his face so quickly she almost missed it. Good, because I wasn't going to let you leave anyway. I was prepared to lock you in a stall if necessary. Despite everything, Alara laughed. That seems extreme. I'm an extreme person. She set the sack down on the ground. So what now? Now we wait for Mercer to make his move, and when he does, we're ready. But Mercer was smarter than they anticipated. 3 days later, a group of men from town rode out to the ranch. Not the sheriff, but a citizens' committee led by the mayor. They demanded to inspect the horses, looking for stolen brands. Cade let them. He had nothing to hide. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. Doubt had been planted. People are scared, the mayor said as they prepared to leave. Scared of Mercer, scared of getting caught in the crossfire. You need to handle this, Blackthorn, before someone gets hurt. I'm trying, Cade said tightly. Try harder. After they left, Cade punched the barn wall hard enough to split his knuckles. Alara grabbed his hand before he could do it again. Don't, she said. You'll break your hand. I don't care. Well, I do. We need you functional. He looked at her, breathing hard, eyes blazing with frustration. Then slowly, the tension drained out of him. This is what he wants, Cade said. To make me lose control, make me look dangerous. Then don't give him what he wants. Easier said than done. Alara held his damaged hand carefully, examining the split skin. Come on, let's get this cleaned up. She led him to the pump behind the barn and made him hold his hand under the cold water while she cleaned the wound. His knuckles were already swelling, the skin torn and bloody. You're an idiot, she said, but her voice was gentle. I know. Punching walls doesn't solve problems. It made me feel better. For about 5 seconds. That's 5 seconds I needed. She wrapped his hand in a clean cloth, tying it snug. There. Try not to hit anything else for a while. No promises. They stood close together, her hand still holding his. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Alara, Cade said quietly, if this goes bad, it won't. But if it does, then we'll handle it, together, like you said. He looked at her for a long moment, something raw and unguarded in his expression. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry, and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say. Alara kissed him back just as hard, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cade rested his forehead against hers. This complicates things, he said. Everything's already complicated. Fair point. They stood there in the fading evening light, holding on to each other like anchors in a storm. Alara knew this was reckless, knew it would make everything harder. But for the first time since her husband died, she felt something other than grief and exhaustion. She felt alive. The moment shattered when Dutch came running around the corner of the barn, his face pale. Boss, we got riders coming up the valley road. A lot of them. Cade pulled back, his hand instinctively going to the gun at his hip. How many? At least a dozen, maybe more. They're not flying colors, but they're Mercer's men, Cade finished grimly. Alara's heart kicked into overdrive. What do we do? Cade's face went hard. We get everyone inside, lock down the house and the barns, and we don't shoot first. And if they shoot first, Dutch asked, then we shoot back. They moved fast. Dutch rounded up the ranch hands while Cade grabbed rifles from the gun cabinet in the house. Alara helped Catherine and the cook barricade the kitchen windows, her hands shaking with adrenaline. This is your fault, Catherine hissed as they shoved furniture against the door. You brought this here. Not now, Alara snapped. When, then? When we're all dead? Alara ignored her and moved to the window, peering through the gap in the boards. The riders were visible now, a dark mass moving up the road. They stopped just outside the property line, horses stamping, men talking in low voices. Then one of them rode forward alone, Boone Mercer. He was older than Alara expected, maybe 45, with a weather-beaten face and eyes like chips of ice. He sat easy in the saddle, completely relaxed, like he was just out for a pleasant ride. Blackthorn, he called. I know you're in there. Come out and talk. Man to man. Cade appeared on the porch, rifle held loose in one hand. We've got nothing to talk about, Mercer. Sure we do. I hear you've been stealing horses. Thought I'd come see for myself. You've been spreading lies. We both know it. Mercer smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Do we? Seems to me there's a lot of coincidences. New woman shows up out of nowhere. Horses start disappearing from neighboring ranches. You really expect people to believe that's all innocent? There are no stolen horses here. The sheriff already checked. Sheriff can be fooled, especially by a pretty face. Mercer's gaze found Alara through the window. That her? Your little accomplice? Leave her out of this, Cade said, his voice dropping to a growl. Can't do that. See, word is she's been helping my organization, providing information, marking which ranches have the best stock. That's a lie and you know it. Maybe. Or maybe you've been played, Blackthorn. Wouldn't be the first time a lonely man got taken in by a woman with sad eyes. Alara felt sick. He was twisting everything, turning her presence here into a weapon. State your business and get off my land, Cade said. My business is simple. I want compensation for what you took from me. 5 years of my life, my reputation, my land. I figure your ranch is worth about that much. You're insane. Am I? Or am I just a man who wants justice? Mercer's voice rose, pitched to carry to his men. You put me in prison on false charges, destroyed everything I built. Now it's time to settle accounts. The charges weren't false. You were rustling cattle and everyone knew it. That was never proven. Because you had half the witnesses scared into silence. Mercer's expression went cold. Last chance, Blackthorn. Sign over the ranch to me and I'll leave peaceful. You and your people can ride out of here with your lives. Go to hell. Wrong answer. Mercer wheeled his horse around and rode back to his men. They conferred briefly, then spread out, encircling the ranch buildings. Alara's heart pounded. They're not leaving. No, Cade said, coming back inside. They're not. So what do we do? We wait. They're not going to attack in daylight with this many witnesses around. They'll try something tonight. And then, Cade checked his rifle, his face grim. Then we fight. The day crawled by in agonizing slowness. Mercer's men stayed just outside rifle range, watching, waiting. Alara could see them taking shifts, settling in for a siege. As darkness fell, Cade gathered everyone in the main house. They're going to come tonight, he said. Probably try to burn us out or stampede the horses. Maybe both. We need to be ready. We're outnumbered 2-1, Dutch pointed out. I know, but we have the advantage of position. They have to come to us. Unless they just burn the place and shoot us as we run out, Lyle said. Then we make sure they can't burn the place. They spent the next hour preparing, soaking blankets in water, positioning men at strategic windows, loading every gun on the property. Alara worked alongside them, her fear transforming into something harder. Determination. She'd lost everything once before. She wasn't going to lose it again without a fight. Around midnight, Cade pulled her aside. I need you to do something for me, he said quietly. What? If this goes bad, I need you to take the back trail out of here. There's a route through the canyon that leads to the next valley. You can make it to safety. I'm not running. Alara. No, I told you I'd stay. I meant it. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Mercer made it my fight when he used me as an excuse. I'm not giving him the satisfaction of running. Cade looked like he wanted to argue, but he just pulled her close instead, holding her tight. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met, he said into her hair. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's terrifying. She pulled back enough to look at him. We're going to survive this. How do you know? Because we've both survived worse, and because I'm not done with you yet. He kissed her then, hard and fierce, like he was memorizing the taste of her. When they broke apart, his eyes were bright with something that looked like hope. After this is over, he said, when we're safe, I want... The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Mercer's attack had begun. Alara hit the floor as bullets tore through the walls above her head. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Someone screamed in the next room. Cade was already at the window, rifle up, returning fire. The muzzle flash lit his face in stark bursts of light and shadow. East side, Dutch shouted from somewhere down the hall. They're coming from the east. More gunfire. The air filled with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Alara scrambled toward the overturned table where Catherine crouched, eyes wide with terror. Stay down! Alara yelled. Another window exploded. A bullet punched through the wall inches from Alara's head, sending splinters into her cheek. She felt blood, hot and wet, but there was no time to think about it. Cade fired 3 quick shots, then ducked back to reload. They're trying to flank us through the barn. How many? Dutch called back. Too many! Outside, horses screamed in panic. Alara could hear men shouting, their voices blending into a chaotic roar. Then came a new sound, the crackle of flames. They're burning the stables, someone yelled. Cade's face went white. The horses are still in there. We can't get to them, Dutch said, appearing in the doorway. Not without getting cut down. Then we're losing half the stock. Cade slammed his fist against the wall. Damn it! Alara's mind raced. The horses. The barn. The flames already climbing the dry wood. She thought about the mare she'd saved, about all the animals trapped in those stalls, terrified and helpless, about how she'd survived by being too stubborn to quit. There's another way, she said. Cade turned to her. What? The back route. The one you told me to use if things went bad. It leads to the canyon, right? Past the corrals? Yeah, but I can get to the horses from there. Open the gates. Let them run. You'll get yourself killed. Not if everyone's focused on the house. She grabbed his arm. Cade, those horses are worth more than this building. You said it yourself. We lose them. We lose everything. I don't care about the horses. I care about you. The words hung between them for half a heartbeat. Then another volley of gunfire shattered the moment. I'm going, Alara said. You can't stop me. The hell I can't. She's right, Dutch's voice cut through. Those horses are our breeding stock, our working animals. We lose them. The ranch is finished even if we survive tonight. Cade looked like he wanted to argue. His jaw worked, muscles tight. I'll be careful, Alara said quietly. I promise. Your promises don't stop bullets. No, but neither does hiding in here while everything burns. He stared at her. Then, cursing under his breath, he grabbed his pistol from his belt and pressed it into her hands. Take this. Don't use it unless you have to. And if something happens, it won't. If it does, you run. You don't look back, you understand? Alara nodded, even though they both knew it was a lie. Cade pulled her close, kissed her hard. Come back to me. Always. Then she was moving, staying low, slipping through the kitchen toward the back door. Catherine's voice followed her, sharp with panic. You're insane. You'll die out there. Alara didn't answer. She eased the door open and slipped into the night. The world outside was chaos. Flames climbed the barn walls, painting everything in hellish orange light. Gunfire cracked and echoed. Men shouted. Horses screamed. Alara pressed herself against the house wall, heart hammering. The back route started 20 yards away, behind the old smokehouse. 20 yards of open ground. She took a breath. Then she ran. Her boots pounded dirt. Every step felt exposed, like a target painted on her back. She expected bullets to tear into her at any second. Nothing came. She reached the smokehouse and threw herself behind it, gasping. Her hand shook. Blood from the cut on her cheek dripped onto her collar. No time. Keep moving. The path was barely visible in the darkness, just a narrow game trail that wound through scrub brush toward the canyon. Alara followed it by memory and instinct, stumbling over roots, thorns tearing at her dress. Behind her, the gunfire intensified. She heard Cade's rifle, 3 shots in quick succession, the rhythm she'd learned to recognize. He was still fighting. Stay alive, she thought. Just stay alive until I get back. The trail opened onto the upper corral. Below, she could see the main barn fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the sky. But the corrals themselves were still intact, the gates closed, and inside the horses ran in panicked circles, trapped. Alara scrambled down the rocky slope, half sliding, catching herself on scrub brush. She hit the corral fence hard, climbed it in 3 quick movements, and dropped inside. The horses shied away from her, whites of their eyes showing, terrified, on the edge of trampling anything in their path. "Easy," Alara said, even though her own voice shook. "Easy now." She moved toward the gate, hands out, trying not to spook them further. A big gelding charged past her, close enough that she felt the heat of its body. Another reared, hooves flashing. She reached the gate latch, her fingers fumbled with the rope, slick with sweat. "Come on! Come on!" The knot gave way. The gate swung open. For a second, nothing happened. The horses milled, confused by the sudden opening. Then one mare bolted through, and the rest followed in a thundering rush. Alara pressed herself against the fence as they poured past, a living flood of muscle and panic. The ground shook. Dust choked the air. She counted them as they fled, 15, 20, 25. Almost the entire breeding stock, heading away from the flames, away from the gunfire, into the dark safety of the valley. Relief flooded through her. They'd made it. The horses were... Well, Alara spun. Boone Mercer stood 10 feet away, pistol aimed at her chest. He looked different up close, harder, meaner, the kind of man who enjoyed watching things break. "That was real heroic," he said. "Stupid, but heroic." Alara's hand moved toward the pistol tucked in her belt. "Don't." Mercer's gun didn't waver. "I'll drop you before you clear leather." She froze. He stepped closer, eyes cataloging her. "You're the widow. Quinn, right? The one everyone's talking about." Alara didn't answer. "I gotta admit, I didn't expect you to be the problem. Thought you were just some desperate woman Blackthorn took pity on. But you're tougher than you look." He smiled without warmth. "That's gonna make killing you more satisfying." "You won't get away with this," Alara said. The sheriff will find a tragic scene. Outlaw attack. Everyone dead. Real shame." He tilted his head. "Of course, I might spare you, if you're smart. Tell me where Blackthorn keeps his money, his papers. Help me finish this quick." "Go to hell." Mercer's smile widened. "See, that's what I thought you'd say. Women like you don't bend easy. I respect that." He raised the pistol, aiming at her head. "But respect don't stop bullets." Alara's mind raced. She was too far to rush him, too exposed to run. No cover within reach. This was it. This was how she died. She thought about Cade, about the kiss that still burned on her lips, about all the things they'd never get to say. Then she heard it, a sound like thunder. Mercer heard it too. His eyes widened. The horses came back, not fleeing anymore, charging, a wall of horseflesh and fury pouring back through the darkness, driven by something Alara couldn't see. No, not something. Someone. Through the dust and chaos, she saw a figure on horseback. The mare, the one she'd rescued, with a rider on her back. Cade. He'd followed her. Somehow found the mare, somehow known. "Run!" he shouted. Alara didn't think. She dove sideways as the herd thundered past, a living avalanche. Mercer tried to shoot, but the horses were already on him. He disappeared beneath the stampede, his scream cut short. Cade pulled the mare up hard, reaching down. "Take my hand." Alara grabbed it. He hauled her up behind him in one motion, and then they were riding, the mare running flat out back toward the ranch. "What are you doing here?" Alara yelled over the thunder of hooves. "Saving your reckless ass! I told you I'd be careful!" "Your definition of careful is broken." Despite everything, the danger, the chaos, the terror, Alara almost laughed. They burst back into the ranch yard to find the battle had turned. Mercer's men, seeing the horses stampede through their ranks, had broken formation. Some were down. Others were fleeing. The ones who remained were pinned down by rifle fire from the house. Cade pulled up near the porch. "Get inside." What about you? I'm finishing this. He slid off the mare and pulled his rifle from the saddle scabbard. Go! Alara wanted to argue, but Dutch appeared and physically pulled her toward the house. Come on, girl, let him work. Inside, the scene was grim. 2 ranch hands were down, one dead, one bleeding badly from a shoulder wound. Catherine was sobbing in the corner. The cook worked frantically to staunch the wounded man's bleeding. Alara dropped to her knees beside them. Let me help. The cook looked at her blood-streaked face and nodded. Together they worked while the battle raged outside. Alara tore her already ruined skirt into strips, binding the wound tight. Her hands were steady, even though her mind kept replaying Mercer's gun aimed at her head, the moment before the horses came. She'd been seconds from death, and Cade had saved her. Outside, the gunfire slowed, then stopped. Silence fell like a weight. Alara held her breath, listening. Then Cade's voice, strong and alive. It's over. They're running. Relief crashed through her so hard she nearly collapsed. Dutch helped her to her feet. Go on. He'll want to see you. She stumbled to the door and out onto the porch. The ranch yard was a disaster. Broken glass everywhere. Bullet holes stitching the walls. The barn still burning, though the flames were dying down. Bodies on the ground. Mercer's men, most of them. And in the center of it all, Cade stood with his rifle still smoking, face streaked with soot and blood, but alive. Their eyes met across the devastation. Alara walked toward him. He met her halfway. You followed me, she said. Of course I did. I told you I'd be fine. You had a gun pointed at your head. I had it handled. You were about to die. So were you. Multiple times, probably. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip almost painful. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever make me choose between the ranch and you. I saved the horses. I don't care about the horses. Yes, you do. Not as much as... He stopped, jaw working. As much as what? Alara pressed. As much as you, damn it. The words came out rough, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. I don't care about any of this if you're dead. The ranch, the horses, none of it matters. Alara's throat tightened. Cade, I watched my wife die. My son. I swore I'd never let myself care about anyone like that again. Then you showed up with that damn burlap sack and your stubborn eyes, and you ruined everything. You made me want things again, want a future, want something other than just surviving day to day. His hands slid from her shoulders to cup her face, thumbs gentle against her cheekbones. I love you. I'm terrible at it. I'm broken and angry, and I don't know how to do this, but I love you anyway. The words hung in the air between them, raw and true. Alara felt tears sliding down her face, cutting tracks through the dust and blood. I love you too, she whispered. Even though you're an idiot who punches walls and follows women into firefights, he laughed, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and real. We're quite a pair. Yeah, we are. He kissed her then, and this time it wasn't desperate or afraid. It was a promise, a beginning instead of an ending. When they finally pulled apart, Dutch was standing nearby, grinning despite the carnage. You two done making speeches? Because we got bodies to deal with and a fire to finish putting out. Cade didn't let go of Alara's hand. Where's Mercer? Dead. Trampled when the horses came through. Poetic, if you ask me. The others? 4 dead, 3 wounded bad enough they won't be going anywhere. The rest ran. Sheriff's gonna have a field day sorting this mess. As if summoned, the sound of hooves announced riders approaching. The sheriff and a dozen men from town appeared, guns drawn, taking in the scene. The sheriff's eyes widened. What in the hell happened here? Mercer attacked, Cade said flatly. We defended ourselves. Jesus, is he dead? Back by the corrals. The sheriff dismounted, already looking overwhelmed. I'm going to need statements from everyone. This is one hell of a mess, Blackthorn. I'm aware. More townspeople arrived, drawn by the flames and gunfire. They stood at the property line, staring, whispering among themselves. Alara saw Catherine emerge from the house, her face pale. She pushed through the crowd until she found the sheriff. He's lying, Catherine shouted, her voice shrill. She caused this. That woman brought Mercer here. Every eye turned to Alara. Her stomach dropped. That's enough, Catherine, Cade said sharply. No, everyone knows she's been helping him. She's a thief and a liar, and she... Shut your mouth. The words came from Dutch, cold and hard. My wife, you will shut your mouth right now. Catherine stared at him, shocked. This woman, Dutch continued, pointing at Alara, saved our breeding stock tonight, risked her life while the rest of us were pinned down. She's got more courage in her little finger than you've got in your whole body. But the rumors were started by Mercer to turn us against each other. And it worked, didn't it? You were so busy hating her, you couldn't see the real threat. Dutch's voice was heavy with disgust. I'm ashamed of you, ashamed I didn't stop this sooner. Catherine's face crumpled. She turned and fled back into the house. The sheriff cleared his throat. So, about these statements. They spent the next several hours recounting everything. Kate explained Mercer's vendetta, the rumors, the siege. Dutch corroborated. Even Lyle, surprisingly, backed up their version, maybe because he'd nearly died himself. The sheriff inspected the bodies, the burnt barn, the bullet-riddled house. He interviewed the wounded outlaws, who confirmed it was Mercer's plan, Mercer's attack. By the time the sun rose, washing the valley in pale gold light, the truth was clear. Alara Quinn wasn't a thief or a conspirator. She was a survivor, a fighter, a hero. The townspeople who'd come to gawk stayed to help. They put out the last of the flames, started cleaning up debris, brought food and medical supplies. The same people who'd shunned Alara weeks ago now nodded to her with something like respect. The mayor himself approached Cade as they were burying the dead ranch hand, a young man named Cooper who'd taken a bullet to the chest. I owe you an apology, the mayor said. We should have seen through Mercer's lies, should have backed you up sooner. Yes, Cade said bluntly. You should have. The mayor winced. For what it's worth, you've got the town's support now. Anything you need to rebuild. I'll remember that. After the burial, Alara found herself alone by the corral fence, watching the surviving horses graze in the pasture. They'd rounded up most of them. Some were missing, scattered into the valley, but they'd come back eventually. Horses always remembered home. The mare, her mare, she thought of it now, stood nearby, ears pricked toward her. You saved my life, Alara said softly. You and your stubborn rider. The mare snorted, as if to say it was no big deal. Footsteps approached. Alara didn't need to turn to know it was Cade. He stood beside her, shoulders touching hers. They were both exhausted, covered in soot and blood and dirt, but alive. I've been thinking, Cade said. That's dangerous. He almost smiled. About what happens now. The ranch is damaged, going to take months to rebuild properly. Money's going to be tight. We'll manage. We? Alara looked at him. You think I'm leaving after all this? I think you've earned the right to do whatever you want. You don't owe me anything. Maybe I don't do things because I owe people. Maybe I do them because I want to. And what do you want? She turned to face him fully. I want to stay. I want to help rebuild. I want to see if we can actually make this work. This? Us, the ranch, all of it. Cade's expression softened. That's a lot of wanting. I've spent a long time wanting nothing but to survive the next day. I'm tired of it. I want more now. More is scary. Terrifying, Alara agreed. But maybe that means it's worth having. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. The mare needs a name, Cade said after a moment. I thought you didn't name horses until they proved themselves. She proved herself. Brought me to you when you needed it. That's worth a name. What should we call her? Cade was quiet, thinking. Hope. We'll call her Hope. Alara smiled against his chest. That's sentimental of you. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to maintain. They stood there as the sun climbed higher, warming the scorched earth. Around them, people worked to clean up the damage, rebuild what had been broken. It would take time. It would be hard. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Alara believed it was possible. Not just survival, not just getting through, but actually living. Dutch appeared, looking exhausted but satisfied. Boss, we got the last of the debris cleared from the main barn. Foundation's solid. We can start rebuilding tomorrow if you want. Good. Get some rest first. We've all earned it. Dutch nodded and started to leave, then paused. For what it's worth. You two are good together. Don't screw it up. He walked away before either of them could respond. Cade looked down at Alara. No pressure. None at all. They both laughed, the sound tired but real. The sheriff rode up one more time before leaving, tipping his hat to Alara. Miss Quinn, I owe you an apology too. Should have looked harder at Mercer's claims before I let them spread. Water under the bridge, Alara said. Still. You're welcome in Hollow Creek anytime. In fact, I suspect you'll be getting some apologies from other folks too. I won't hold my breath. The sheriff smiled. Smart woman. Blackthorn's lucky to have you. After he left, Cade raised an eyebrow. You forgave him pretty quick. What's the point of holding grudges? We won. They lost. Everyone knows the truth now. You're more generous than I am. That's not a high bar. He laughed and kissed the top of her head. Come on, let's get you cleaned up. You look like you fought a war. I did. Fair point. They walked toward the house together, hands clasped. Catherine emerged as they approached, her face red and swollen from crying. She looked at Alara, opened her mouth, closed it. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I'm sorry. I was wrong. About everything. Alara studied her for a moment, saw genuine remorse there mixed with shame. All right, she said simply. Catherine blinked. That's it? Just all right? What do you want me to say? I'm not going to make you grovel. You were wrong. You admitted it. We move forward. I don't deserve Probably not. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I'm tired of fighting. We've got enough real enemies without making them out of each other. Catherine's eyes filled with fresh tears. She nodded and fled back inside. Dutch, who'd been watching from the porch, gave Alara an approving nod. You're a better person than I am. I just know how to pick my battles. That's wisdom right there. Inside the house was a disaster, but it was standing. The cook had prepared food, simple but hot. They ate together, all of them, sharing the meal in exhausted silence. Alara sat beside Cade, their shoulders touching. Across the table, Dutch smiled at them. Even Lyle kept his mouth shut, though his expression suggested he was still processing everything. After the meal, Cade stood. I want to say something. Everyone looked up. We lost a good man tonight. Cooper was young, had his whole life ahead of him. That's on Mercer, but it's also on me for not seeing the threat sooner. His voice was rough. We also nearly lost everything, the ranch, the stock, each other. But we didn't. We survived because we fought together, because people stepped up when it mattered. His eyes found Alara. And because sometimes the best things in life come from the places you least expect. From strangers who turn into family, from second chances when you thought you'd used them all up. He raised his coffee mug. To Cooper. To survival. To whatever comes next. They all raised their mugs, echoing the toast. And as Alara drank, surrounded by people who'd become something like family, in a place that had become something like home, she felt the weight she'd been carrying since her husband died finally begin to lift. Not disappearing. Grief never did that, but lightening enough that she could breathe underneath it. The sun was setting when Cade found her in the barn, brushing down Hope. The mare stood calm under her hands, no longer skittish. You should be resting, he said. So should you. Can't. Too much to do. Then I guess we're both stubborn. He leaned against the stall door, watching her work. I meant what I said earlier, about loving you. I know. And I want you to stay. Not just for now, for good. As my partner. In the ranch, in life, in everything. Alara's hands stilled on the brush. She turned to face him. Cade, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. We barely know each other, and I'm still figuring out how to be a whole person again. But I want you to know my intentions, where this is heading. Where is it heading? Somewhere permanent, if you'll have me. Alara crossed the stall, stopping close enough to see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. I spent so long just trying to survive, just trying to make it through another day. I forgot what it felt like to want a future. And now? Now I want one. With you. Here. She touched his face gently. You're right. We barely know each other. We're both broken in ways that might never fully heal. This is probably going to be hard and messy and complicated. Probably? Definitely. But I'm done running from hard things. I ran after my husband died, and it got me here. Maybe that was always where I was supposed to end up. Cade pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I don't believe in fate. Neither do I. But maybe some coincidences are too perfect to be random. He kissed her, soft and slow, like they had all the time in the world. Like tomorrow wasn't full of hard work and rebuilding, like loss hadn't carved permanent holes in both their hearts. When they pulled apart, both breathing a little harder, Alara smiled. So what now? Now we rebuild. The barn, the fences, the herd, everything Mercer tried to destroy. That'll take months. Years, probably. Good, Alara said. I'm not planning on going anywhere. They walked out of the barn together as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. The ranch yard was quiet now, everyone either asleep or resting. The burnt smell still lingered, but underneath it was the familiar scent of horses and earth and home. Cade's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. You know what the worst part of losing my family was? He said quietly. What? Not the grief. That was horrible, but I expected it. The worst part was thinking I'd never feel anything good again, that I'd just exist in this gray space forever. And now? Now I feel things. Because of you, it's terrifying. Love usually is. Is that what you call this? Alara squeezed his hand. Yeah, I think it is. They stood together in the gathering darkness, two broken people who'd somehow found each other in the ruins, who'd fought and survived and come out the other side still standing. The ranch spread out around them, damaged but not destroyed, wounded but healing, just like them. Morning came cold and clear, the kind of dawn that made everything look sharp-edged and new. Alara woke in the small room above the tack house to find Cade already gone, his side of the bed cool to the touch. They'd started sharing the space 3 nights after the attack, neither of them saying much about it, just gravitating toward each other in the darkness, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She dressed quickly and headed outside to find the ranch already humming with activity. Dutch was organizing work crews. The sound of hammers echoed from where men were framing the new barn. Smoke rose from the cook shack chimney, life stubbornly continuing. She found Cade by the corrals watching a crew unload lumber from a wagon. The town had sent it, part of the aid they'd promised. Guilt money, Alara figured, but she wasn't going to refuse it. You should have woken me, she said. He turned, and the smile that crossed his face was small but real. You needed sleep. You've been working 18-hour days for 2 weeks straight. So have you. I'm used to it. That's not the defense you think it is. He laughed and pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Fair point. Dutch walked over, ledger in hand. Morning, Quinn. Boss, we got the foundation measurements done. Should be able to start pouring tomorrow if the weather holds. Good. What about the fence line? Half finished. Lyle's crew is on it. Cade's eyebrows rose. Lyle's actually working? Shocking, I know. But yeah, he's been different since the attack, quieter, does what he's told. Alara had noticed it too. Lyle hadn't apologized. She doubted he knew how, but he'd stopped the hostility, stopped the snide comments and deliberate sabotage. Maybe facing death did that to a person, made you realize which battles actually mattered. Speaking of changes, Dutch continued, looking uncomfortable, Catherine wants to talk to you both. Together. Alara and Cade exchanged glances. This should be interesting, Cade muttered. They found Catherine in the main house kitchen, kneading bread dough with more force than strictly necessary. She looked up when they entered, flour dusting her cheeks. Thank you for coming, she said stiffly. What's this about? Cade asked. Catherine took a breath. I'm leaving, going back east to stay with my sister in Pennsylvania. Silence. Dutch appeared in the doorway, his face carefully neutral. Alara realized he'd known this was coming. When? Cade asked. End of the month. I've already written to my sister. She's expecting me. Does this have anything to do with me being a terrible person? Catherine's laugh was bitter. Yes, partly, but also because I don't belong here. I never did. I married Dutch thinking ranch life would be romantic. Thought I'd be the lady of some grand estate. She gestured around the modest kitchen. This isn't what I imagined. and I made everyone miserable trying to force it into something it wasn't. Catherine, Dutch started. No. Let me finish. She turned to Alara, her eyes shining. I was cruel to you. Not just unkind, but deliberately cruel. You were everything I was afraid of being. Alone, powerless, dependent on yourself. And instead of collapsing like I would have, you thrived. That terrified me. So I tried to break you. I know, Alara said quietly. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Probably not, but I'm giving it anyway. Holding on to anger takes energy I don't have. Catherine's face crumpled. She turned back to the dough, punching it down. Dutch is staying. In case you're wondering, he belongs here. I don't. We're ending the marriage. Amicably as we can. Dutch's expression was sad, but resigned. It's been dying for a while. We both knew it. I'm sorry, Cade said, and he sounded like he meant it. Don't be. Some things aren't meant to last. Better to end them clean than let them rot. Catherine shaped the dough into loaves with practiced efficiency. I just wanted you to know, and to say goodbye properly, without all the poison I've been carrying around. Alara stepped forward and, to everyone's surprise, including her own, hugged Catherine. The other woman stiffened, then slowly relaxed, her hands coming up to grip Alara's shoulders. I hope you find what you're looking for back east, Alara said. I hope you hold on to what you've found here, Catherine whispered back. When they pulled apart, both women had tears in their eyes. Catherine turned to Cade. Take care of her, and let her take care of you. You're both too stubborn to admit you need people, but you do. I'm working on it, Cade said. Work harder. After they left, Alara and Cade walked in silence toward the half-built barn. That was unexpected, Alara said finally. Which part? Catherine leaving or you hugging her? Both. You're more forgiving than most people. Or maybe I just understand that hurt people hurt people. She was miserable. Miserable people lash out. Doesn't make it right. But it makes it human. Cade pulled her close, tucking her under his arm. See? That right there. That's why I love you. You see people clearly, but you don't hate them for being flawed. Everyone's flawed. Hating people for it seems like a waste of time. Most people don't think like that. Then most people are exhausting themselves for nothing. He laughed and kissed the top of her head. Come on, let's get to work. This barn won't build itself. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Work from dawn to dusk. Meals shared in the cook shack. Evenings spent going over accounts and breeding schedules. Nights tangled together in the small room, learning each other's bodies and histories in equal measure. Cade told her about his wife, not the idealized version people created after someone died, but the real woman, her temper, her laugh, the way she'd hated ranch life but loved him enough to try, how she'd cried when their son was born, terrified she'd be a terrible mother. Was she? Alara asked one night, lying in the darkness. Never got the chance to find out. He was 6 months old when the fever came. Cade's voice was rough. I keep wondering who he would have been, what he would have looked like at 5, 10, 15. That wondering never stops, Alara said. I do it too. Wonder what my husband and I would have built if he'd lived, if we'd have made it west, had children, grown old together. Do you think we would have met if our spouses had lived? No, we'd be different people, living different lives. Does that make us terrible? Being grateful for something that came from loss? Alara turned to face him in the darkness. I think it makes us human. We can grieve what we lost and still be grateful for what we found. Both things can be true. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. I don't know what I did to deserve you. Probably nothing. Life doesn't work on deserving. It just works on what you do with what you're given. And what are you doing with what you've been given? Building something that lasts, with a stubborn man who punches walls. I haven't punched a wall in 3 weeks. A personal record. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into hers. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were memorizing each other. And afterwards, lying in the tangle of sheets and limbs, Alara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of pain or grief or fear, but the presence of something stronger than all of those things combined. Hope. The barn was finished in 6 weeks. They held a small celebration, Nothing fancy, just whiskey passed around and Dutch making a toast about perseverance and community. The new structure stood proud against the mountain backdrop, smelling of fresh timber and possibility. Elara stood beside Cade, watching the celebration, and felt his hand find hers. "We did it," he said quietly. "We did. Couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. But it would have taken longer and involved more wall punching." He grinned. "Probably true." The sheriff rode up during the celebration, dismounting to shake Cade's hand. Wanted to deliver the news in person. Trial set for Mercer's men who survived. They're all going to prison, 15 to 20 years each. "Good," Cade said. "Also wanted to tell you, the county's ruling the attack justified defense. No charges against you or anyone here. You're clear." Relief swept through Elara. She hadn't realized how much she'd been carrying that worry until it was lifted. "Thank you, Sheriff," Cade said. "Thank Miss Quinn. She's the one who turned public opinion. Everyone in town's been talking about how she saved the horses, how she stood and fought when she could have run. You've got a real partner there, Blackthorn." "I know." After the sheriff left, the mayor approached with several town council members. They looked uncomfortable. "We owe you an apology," the mayor said. "Both of you. We let fear and rumors poison our judgment. We should have stood with you from the start." "Yes," Cade said flatly. "You should have." The mayor winced. "We'd like to make amends. The council's voted to waive your property taxes for the next 2 years. Give you time to rebuild without that burden." Elara saw Cade's surprise quickly hidden. "That's generous. It's the least we can do. You protected this valley. If Mercer had succeeded here, he would have terrorized the whole region. You stopped him. We owe you." "We'll accept," Cade said. "But we won't forget who stood with us when it mattered and who didn't." The mayor nodded, accepting the rebuke. "Fair enough." After they left, Dutch sidled up. "You handled that well. Could have told them to go to hell." "I wanted to," Cade admitted, "but Alara's been teaching me about picking battles." "Smart woman." "The smartest." Elara rolled her eyes but smiled. As autumn settled over the valley, painting the aspens gold and sending frost across the morning grass, the ranch hit its stride. The new barn was fully operational. The breeding program was back on track. The horses they'd scattered during the attack had all returned, drawn back by habit and the promise of feed. Elara found herself falling into the rhythm of ranch life like she'd been born to it. She managed the breeding records, treated sick animals, trained the young horses. The men who'd once viewed her with suspicion now sought her advice. Even Lyle gave her grudging respect, though he still didn't talk much. One evening in late October, Cade found her in the barn treating a colt with colic. She had her hands pressed against the animal's distended belly, working the gas out with careful pressure. "Is he gonna make it?" Cade asked. "Yeah, just ate too fast and got himself bloated. He'll be fine by morning." Cade watched her work, his expression thoughtful. "What?" Elara asked. "I was just thinking about the day you showed up here, how you looked, half-starved, desperate, like the wind would blow you over." "I was half-starved and desperate, but not weak, never weak." He moved closer. "You've changed this place, made it better, made me better. You were fine before I got here." "No, I was surviving. There's a difference." The colt shifted under her hands, already looking more comfortable. Elara gave him a final pat and stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. "I need to ask you something," Cade said. Something in his tone made her turn fully toward him. He was holding something, a small wooden box, rough-carved but beautiful. "I made this," he said. "Spent the last month working on it in the evenings. It's not fancy. I'm not good with words or romantic gestures, but I wanted you to have something that showed—" He trailed off, frustrated. Elara took the box gently. Inside, nestled on a bed of cloth, was a ring. Simple silver band with a single small stone. Not a diamond, but a piece of turquoise the color of summer sky. Her throat tightened. "It's not expensive," Cade said quickly. "I know you deserve better, but I wanted something from here, from the valley. That stone came from the canyon where you found hope. I went back and searched until I found it." "Cade, let me finish. I'm bad at this, and if I stop, I'll lose my nerve." He took a breath. "I told you I wasn't ready to ask you to marry me, that we barely knew each other, that I was still figuring things out." "I remember. I was wrong." Not about us barely knowing each other. We don't, not really. But I know enough. I know you're brave and stubborn, and you see people for who they really are. I know you make me want to be better than I am. I know waking up without you feels wrong now. And I know that if I lost you, I wouldn't survive it the same way I survived losing my family, because this time, I'd know exactly what I was losing. Tears were sliding down Alara's face now, unchecked. So I'm asking, Cade continued, his voice rough, not because I think I deserve you. I don't. But because I love you and I want to build a life with you. A real life. Not just survival. Will you marry me? Alara looked at the ring, at the man who'd carved the box with his own hands, who'd searched a canyon for a specific stone because it meant something. She thought about the woman who'd arrived here months ago with nothing but a burlap sack and desperation, who'd been ready to die alone in the wilderness rather than beg for scraps. She thought about how far she'd come, how much she'd survived, how she'd learned that strength wasn't about standing alone, it was about knowing when to let someone stand beside you. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Cade's face transformed. Relief and joy and something deeper flooded his expression. He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, and then he was kissing her, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Alara laughed through her tears. We're both disasters, you know that? I know. This is probably going to be hard. We're both too stubborn. We'll fight. Probably. And we've both got grief we're still carrying. That doesn't just disappear. I know that too. So what makes you think this will work? Cade cupped her face in his calloused hands. Because we're both too stubborn to quit, because we've survived worse things than a difficult marriage, and because I'd rather fight through life with you than coast through it without you. That's not very romantic. I told you I'm bad at this. No, Alara said, pulling him close. You're perfect at it. They were married 3 weeks later in the ranch yard, with the whole valley in attendance. The preacher from Hollow Creek officiated. Dutch stood as best man. A woman from town Alara had befriended stood as her witness. It wasn't fancy. Alara wore a simple dress Dutch had helped her buy in town. Pale blue, practical, with room to move. Cade wore his best shirt, the one without any patches. They exchanged vows under the November sky, their breath fogging in the cold air, surrounded by people who'd once viewed Alara with suspicion and now looked at her with respect. When the preacher pronounced them married, Cade kissed her thoroughly enough to make several people whistle and cheer. The celebration afterwards was loud and chaotic and perfect. Someone brought fiddles, someone else brought whiskey. They roasted a pig and set up tables in the barn. People danced and laughed and told stories. Alara found herself pulled into conversation after conversation, women asking about the horses, men wanting to know her opinion on breeding stock, children tugging at her skirt to show her treasures. She belonged here now, fully. Completely. Dutch found her near midnight, slightly drunk and grinning. I'm happy for you, Quinn, for both of you. You earned this. I didn't earn anything. I just got lucky. No. Luck is finding $1 in the street. This? He gestured to the celebration, to Cade dancing with an older woman who'd known him since childhood, to the ranch standing proud under the stars. This is what you build when you refuse to quit. You fought for this. Own it. Alara hugged him, surprising them both. Thank you. For everything. For giving me a chance when you didn't have to. That was the boss's call. But you backed it, even when Catherine didn't. That mattered. Dutch's eyes got suspiciously bright. Yeah, well, don't make me cry at a wedding. That's embarrassing. Cade appeared, stealing Alara away for another dance. They moved together in the firelight, his arms around her waist, her head on his shoulder. Happy? He asked quietly. Terrified, Alara admitted. And happy. Both. Good. If you weren't terrified, I'd worry you weren't paying attention. To what? To how much we've got to lose now. How high the stakes are. Alara pulled back enough to look at him. The stakes were always high. We were just too busy surviving to notice. At least now we're surviving together. Is that all this is? Survival? No. This is living. Actual living. The kind where tomorrow matters as much as today, where you make plans and build things and let yourself want a future. And you want that? A future here? I want everything. The ranch, the horses, the hard winters, and the good summers. I want to fight with you about stupid things and make up afterwards. I want to build something that outlasts us both." She touched his face. "I want to stop running from grief and learn to live alongside it. With you." Cade's eyes were suspiciously bright. "I don't know what I did to deserve you walking into my life. You let a desperate woman with a burlap sack prove herself. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You saw me. I still see you every day, and it still takes my breath away." They danced until the fire burned low and people started drifting away in twos and threes, heading home to their own lives and loves. Dutch stayed to help clean up, refusing to let the newlyweds work on their wedding night. "Go on," he said, shooing them toward the house. "We'll handle this. You two have earned one night of not working yourselves to death." Cade and Alara walked to the main house hand in hand. The night was clear and cold. Stars scattered across the sky like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. Inside, Cade had prepared the bedroom, their bedroom now. Candles burned on the dresser, fresh sheets on the bed, flowers in a jar by the window, the last of the autumn blooms. "You did this?" Alara asked. "Dutch helped. Turns out I'm terrible at romantic gestures without supervision. It's perfect." "You keep saying that. I think your standards might be broken." Alara turned to face him, serious now. "My standards are fine. They're just based on what actually matters. Not grand gestures or expensive things, but effort, thoughtfulness. Showing up even when it's hard." She touched the flowers. "This is perfect because you did it, because you cared enough to try." Cade pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm going to try every day for the rest of our lives to be worthy of you. You already are, but I'll take the effort anyway." They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other in new ways now that vows had been spoken and promises made. And afterwards, lying tangled in the sheets with moonlight painting silver stripes across the floor, Alara felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness, exactly. Happiness was too simple a word for what she felt. Wholeness, maybe. The sense that all the broken pieces inside her had finally found a way to fit together again. Not perfectly, there would always be cracks, always be scars, but functional. Beautiful in their imperfection. "What are you thinking?" Cade asked sleepily. "That I walked into a canyon 6 months ago to die, and instead I found a horse who led me here, to you, to this life." "You believe in fate now?" "No. I believe in stubbornness, and horses with good instincts and men who give desperate women chances they don't have to give." "That's a lot of coincidences." "Maybe. Or maybe sometimes the world breaks you down just so you can be rebuilt into something stronger." Cade pulled her closer. "I like that theory better than fate." "Me too. Fate implies we didn't have a choice. We did. Every step, every decision, we could have walked away 100 times. But we didn't. No, we didn't." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people who'd lost everything, and somehow found their way to something better. Winter came hard that year. Snow piled high in the valleys, temperatures dropped so low that water froze in the troughs overnight. But the ranch was ready. The new barn stood firm against the storms. The horses stayed warm and fed. The house never felt empty now that it held 2 people instead of 1. Alara and Cade worked side by side through the long cold months, planning for spring. They pored over breeding charts, deciding which mares to pair with which stallions. They inventoried supplies and made lists of what they'd need come thaw. And in the evenings, when the work was done and the fire burned bright in the hearth, they talked. About everything and nothing. About their pasts and their hopes. About the children they might have someday, if they were lucky. About how they'd run the ranch when they were old and gray. Dutch became a fixture at their dinner table, his divorce from Catherine finalized but amicable. He seemed lighter without the weight of a failing marriage on his shoulders, more like the man he'd been before. "I'm thinking about courting the widow Baker," he announced one night over stew. Alara and Cade exchanged glances. "The one who runs the boarding house in town?" Alara asked. "That's the one. She's sensible, doesn't expect romance, just companionship. We get along well." "Then you should court her," Cade said. "Life's too short to spend it alone." "Says the man who spent 3 years alone before this one showed up." Dutch pointed to Alara. "Which is how I know what I'm talking about. Being alone makes you mean. Having someone makes you human again." Alara reached over and squeezed Cade's hand. Dutch smiled. All right then, I'll ask her. But if she says no, I'm blaming you two for encouraging me. Fair enough, Alara said. Spring came slowly, melting snow revealing brown grass and mud. But underneath the ugliness, green shoots were already pushing through. Life returning. The cycle beginning again. Alara stood in the pasture, watching the mares with their new foals, leggy, awkward creatures still learning how to use their bodies. Hope grazed nearby, her own foal nursing at her side. Cade wrapped his arms around Alara from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. That's a good crop, he said. Best we've had in years. They're beautiful. They are, thanks to you. I just did what needed doing. You did more than that. You brought this place back to life. Brought me back to life. Alara leaned back against him. We brought each other back. That's how it works. Neither of us could have done it alone. No, we couldn't have. They stood there in the spring sunshine, watching new life stumble and grow in the place they'd built together. And Alara thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, starving, desperate, ready to give up. She thought about how close she'd come to not finding that canyon, not finding hope, not finding this life. How many tiny decisions had led her here? How easily any one of them could have gone differently. But they hadn't. And here she stood, in a place she'd never imagined, with a man she'd never expected to find, building a future she'd thought was impossible. Life didn't follow plans. It didn't care about deserving or fairness or logic. It just happened, one moment after another, and you either gave up or kept walking. Alara had kept walking, and it had led her home. What are you thinking about? Cade asked. Second chances, Alara said. How rare they are. How precious. We got lucky. No, we got stubborn. There's a difference. He laughed and kissed her temple. Same thing, maybe. Maybe. A foal wobbled over to investigate them, all legs and curiosity. Alara held out her hand and let it sniff her fingers, its breath warm and soft against her palm. You know what I think? Cade said quietly. I think sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what actually matters. Losing my family nearly destroyed me, but it also taught me not to take anything for granted, to fight for what I have while I have it. And what do you have? You, this ranch, a future, more than I ever thought I'd have again. And if we lose it, if something happens, then we'll have had it, even if just for a while. That's more than most people get. Alara turned in his arms to face him. I love you, not because you saved me or gave me a job or any of that, but because you see the broken parts of me and don't try to fix them. You just make room for them to exist. I love you for the same reason. You never ask me to be anyone other than who I am, even when who I am is angry or difficult or closed off. We're quite a pair. Yeah, we are. The foal lost interest and wandered back to its mother. The sun climbed higher, warming the valley. In the distance, Alara could see Dutch and some of the hands working on the fence line, their voices carrying on the wind. This was her life now. Not perfect, not easy, but real and solid, and hers. She'd learned that survival wasn't about avoiding pain or loss or hardship. It was about enduring them and coming out the other side still capable of love, still capable of hope, still capable of building something beautiful from the wreckage. She'd survived her husband's death, survived starvation and loneliness, survived an outlaw attack and public suspicion, and now she was learning to do something harder than surviving. She was learning to thrive. Come on, Cade said, taking her hand. Let's get back to work. Ranch doesn't run itself. In a minute, Alara said. I just want to stand here for one more minute and remember this. Remember what? This feeling, this moment, everything that led here, and everything that might come after. I want to remember that I was here in this place with you, that I chose this, that we built it together. Cade pulled her close, and they stood in the pasture watching the horses graze while the sun warmed their faces and the mountains stood eternal in the distance. And Alara understood something she'd never quite grasped before. Home wasn't a place you found. It was a place you built, one difficult choice at a time, with people who loved you enough to let you be imperfect. She'd built a home here, in this harsh valley, on this working ranch, with this stubborn man and these demanding animals and this life that required everything she had and gave back twice as much. She'd found her place, her purpose, her peace. Not by running from the past, but by carrying it with her into a future worth fighting for. And that, she thought, was the truest kind of survival there was. The kind that didn't just keep you alive, but made you glad to be living.